Welcome to Beyond the Surface podcast show. I'm your host, Ashley Ann. Join us as we speak with thought leaders who have walked the path of personal transformation. This is the space where we bridge the gap between modern truths and ancient wisdom to shape new perspectives and heal the collective so that we can unbecome all that we aren't and become more of who you have always been. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today I am sharing with you a pivotal moment, this story of how a speech completely changed my life. It changed everything for me. It's a story about stepping into my power, overcoming fear, and how one moment can change your entire trajectory and be a catalyst for aligning you in a path that is maybe not one that you've ever saw for yourself, but that you were always destined to be. It's becoming who you were destined to be. So let's dive in. Once upon a time, public speaking was not just intimidating, but it was paralyzing for me. The thought of having to stand in front of people made me nauseous, and I would get so embarrassed and I would turn bright red like a tomato. And even the thought of that made me feel uncomfortable and more embarrassed. And so I would just avoid it at all costs. And to be honest, this wasn't just about speaking in public. This was actually even just one-on-one. I remember moments being in a relationship and just not being able to speak and feeling like there was a complete block in my throat and just nothing coming out. And yet I was having this conversation internally in my head. And I remember in college, I was part of this health and wellness company, and it sparked my path in personal development and personal growth. And we would host events. And for the most part, I was kind of helping behind the scenes. And ultimately, I mean, that was my comfort zone, was just being behind the scenes, being the help. That's where I felt very safe until I, at some point, was asked to start opening up some of these events and speaking it up. And what's interesting was it almost feels like when I reflect back on that time in my life, it feels like almost the universe was playing this like cruel joke on me when I was being asked to open up these events and to start like sharing my own journey. And at the same time, there was almost like this little quiet whisper that said, you need to do this. So I did. While I was on the sidelines, part of me would envision myself on the stage, and part of me was like, I could do exactly what they're doing right now. I want to do exactly what that person is doing. I want to be the person that is on that stage in the front of the room. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was seeing a reflection in, I was seeing me in the reflection in the people that I had admired. And then came that opportunity. Well, I don't know if I would say that it was an opportunity, but more so this like challenge and being presented with a challenge. I got my opportunity to speak at some of these events. And then, a little while after, then came this opportunity, this even more challenging opportunity. And it was this inspirational public speaking competition. And again, something deep down said, you need to do this. So I did. And as you can start to see, my life is this series of following these breadcrumbs. And I signed up for this competition and I poured my heart and soul into preparing the speech. You only had 3 minutes. It was a 3-minute speech, and surprise, surprise, you can say a lot in 3 minutes. And I remember writing one speech and just feeling like it wasn't it. There was not really like any depth. And I remember just scrapping it, starting all over and thinking to myself, like, there's more that I could say here. There's more like there's more truth, there's more realness and vulnerability that I can bring to this speech, this moment. So I started again, and I finally landed on talking about my battle with confidence and body image. And I wrote the speech, felt really good about it, memorized it because there was no way that I was going to like wing it. And so once I had this speech written, I practiced it relentlessly so that it was engraved in my brain like second nature. And it was just, it became practicing, became a part of my routine. Every night at home, I would stand in my bedroom with a highlighter and my microphone in my hand, and I would just recite it over and over. And then I think I might have heard this tip somewhere. I recorded myself speaking, and then I would listen to that on my bus ride to work. On my bus ride home, I would listen to it over and over for a good like 2 or 3 months before the event. And then the day arrived, and my nerves were already through the roof. And to my surprise, when I arrived at the venue, I was the first speaker out of 19 other speakers. And I just remember thinking, like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, no pressure. You're opening up this event, no pressure. And I remember being given this opportunity, so silly, but I was asked if I wanted a handheld mic or a wireless one. And there was no way that I was changing thank God we had that option, because I don't know what I would have done if I had to use a wireless mic. Thank God I had this opportunity to use this handheld one, because I want it to feel like I was in my bedroom practicing just all the same. It had to be exactly as I practiced. And I think I was probably the only one who used a handheld mic that day. But as I stood on the stage, and I remember having this moment on the stage, and the person who was hosting this event, he was kind of like talking even more, had me take this like photo that I still remember with like everyone standing, and it was all before the speech even happened. And I'm just standing there like, can you let me go? Let me do this. Let me get this over with. As I stood on that stage, finally, when it was that opportunity to begin, my knees were trembling. I was shaking the entire time. I stood in one position. I couldn't move because I was afraid. I was wearing heels. I was afraid that if I even took a step, that I would fall on my face. I was literally, I can put myself back into that moment on that stage, because I was trembling. I was so afraid. But as I started speaking, something magical happened. And I don't know if I fully realized it at that moment, but it's, in hindsight, I guess, there was this energy that I felt, this connection with the audience, but even with myself, that honestly I had never experienced before. And the fear started to dissolve a little bit. And I stepped into this version of myself that I didn't know existed. And as I said my final words, the entire audience stood up. And it might have just been because I was the first one to go. They all stood up and applauded. And I was so happy to be done. Ran off that stage so fast. And then I was able to just sit back and enjoy the rest of the speeches and just really, really be present for all the other speakers. And what I loved about this competition, this first competition that I entered, was that the audience got to vote. There was going to be, I think, 5 winners, like different, just different prizes and whatnot. But it was the audience who got to vote. And to my surprise, I placed third that night. And it just feels like so surreal to even think back, because I didn't even think that I would win anything. And it, to be honest, wasn't even the point. It was just doing this wild thing and saying yes to this was the whole purpose, and it was the whole point. And the speech didn't just change my perspective on public speaking. As cliche as this sounds, it completely changed my life. It became this catalyst for me pivoting my career path and being able to pursue my creative desires, and realizing that my voice did matter. But here's the thing, even after that huge transformational moment for me, I eventually lost that spark. And I'll tell you why in the next episode. What I want to leave you with is this: facing your fears and stepping into the most authentic expression can open up doors that you never would have imagined for yourself. And that is the most beautiful and powerful thing about saying yes to the thing that scares us. Because ultimately, the thing that scares you so much, there is a gift inside of that moment. And so I want to leave you simply again is with this piece around facing your fears and being able to step into this version of you that you never would have been able to anticipate or imagine unless you say yes to the thing that scares you, because there is something on the other side of that that is going to expand you. It's going to expand you in ways that in a sense like your soul is craving. And it leads you, as long as you constantly are following these breadcrumbs and facing the fears, the things that are coming up along the way, you continue to find that most aligned, call it destined path for you, is in following these breadcrumbs and saying yes to the things that feel uncomfortable, that feel scary. So next week, we're going to talk about this spark and losing this spark and why we lose that spark when we have this momentum. So I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media, and we'll see you in the next episode.